up high, and the dreams that you dream of once in a lullaby. Oh, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly.
Anybody out there? Okay, howdy pipe pals. Holy smoky pipe padre coming back at you. Yes. Yeah, it's July 9th, 2026, and I'm here on a beautiful summer evening. And I'm happy to say I am inaugurating a brand new pipe. This is a very special gift from one of our longtime viewers. I'll just say thanks, JB. Thank you so much. And this is a very interesting pipe. Now, I've got to tell you, I really like it. It's got an acrylic stem. And this is an interesting pipe. It's a, don't know if you can see this or not. It is a St. Francis pipe, of all things. St. Francis pipe, yeah. And it's got some really nice inscriptions on it. And let me just get this tamped down just a little bit more. There we go. So the first inscription reads, let's see if I can actually just read it. All of the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of a single candle. Maybe you can read that for yourself. Focus, focus, focus. Okay, there we go. Hopefully you can do that. And then the second inscription says, start by doing what's necessary, then do what is possible, and suddenly there you are doing the impossible. Okay. Yeah. Great. Great, great, great. And St. Francis, pray for us. Okay. Yeah. All right. So again, wonderful gift. I got this about a month ago, and I've been meaning to fire it up, but I just haven't had a lot of free and personal time. Been having different padres coming and staying for a few weeks. And I don't like to smoke when people that are here, they're like non-smokers. And the priest that's here, he went to another parish temporarily, but he's coming back tomorrow. But I think he would not be, I wouldn't say he would be frowning on me, but I just think that he would be, kind of concerned about his health. He's very health conscious. So sometimes there are people that will, in public spaces now, challenge you, especially here in California, to extinguish whatever you're smoking. I remember several years ago, my buddy, Don, I guess he was trying to go by the Country Piper or something like that, Backcountry Piper. Anyway, we went out to a park, like maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, I guess. And I was actually concerned because I hadn't been, I don't smoke hardly at all. I mean, I smoke when I make my videos and And if the mood takes me and it's just a perfect, like a fall afternoon or a winter evening, or like tonight, a nice summer evening, you know, it's a perfect time to light up a pipe. But I just don't smoke on a daily basis. I got to a point where I almost started when I first started my YouTube channel. I have to say, oh my goodness, I hate it when it spews out the fire like that because it burns my shirts. I have so many of these shirts and they all got holes in them. I'm holy. But going out in public and smoking a pipe was a bit of a concern, especially in a park, because I thought, you know, we went off kind of like off to the side, you know, the fringe of the park kind of thing, out in the perimeter. And I just thought, well, and this is the day, you know, when the Karens were starting to come out in force, you know, and tell people, you can't do that, you know, how dare you? You know, I've had a few run-ins with Karens, let me tell you. Anyway, so this is just a great pipe. Really like it. It's got a good feel in the hand. Like I said, I like the acrylic stem. It's not too heavy. And it's made by the Catholic Pipe Company. Catholic Pipe Company. And apparently this gentleman, he makes, I guess he makes regular pipes and standard pipes and sells them, but he also makes custom-made pipes. And hey, that lion has kind of the same nose that I have. Yeah, big lion nose. Okay. So, you know, one of the pipe presenters, and I hope he's still out there, Philip Rivera, if you're still out there, send me a little message or something. I'd like to talk to you about maybe making a pipe. Or this gentleman here, I'm sure he doesn't watch my videos. Most people don't even know who I am, but if he is out there, I'd like to talk to him as well. There's one pipe that I still want to get, I want to have, and I don't think I'm ever going to find a Dunhill version of that. And even if I did, it would probably be, I mean, I'm not against estate pipes. You know, a lot of people have, some people are kind of, you know, they're a little bit, they don't like estate pipes. Some people just don't. And some people do. That's how I got into my first early collection of Dunhills. So I have no problem with estate pipes. Oh, by the way, I'm smoking some, again, Hallow the Wind by Rattray. So, you know, I'm going to talk about a few issues tonight. We're going to get probably a little political here, or at least we're going to talk about current events for sure. But, you know, I was thinking about this when I started looking at the pipe and reading it. And, you know, just kind of, oh, I got a little bit of coffee here. I don't know if I mentioned this, I started drinking the Fruit of the Bean about 2-3 months ago. So I'm back on the caffeine, which is it's kind of a non-starter really. It's just, well, I thought it would help me with my headaches, but it really didn't. As far as sleeping goes, I still have, you know, my sleep issues that I have, and it's just the way it is. I don't think, I don't know. I got to try to research more of that and figure out how I can avoid a lot of the headaches, but the caffeine does help with the headaches. So, you know, there you go. So anyway, if Philip is still making pipes, I'd like to talk to him. And then, or this other gentleman, perhaps I might be able to reach out to him and just see what he can do. Yeah. But St. Francis, let's just talk a little bit. I like this. It's kind of a green color. Now, it almost looks like an Irish pipe now. To be sure. A lot of the Irish guys know. There's a lot of Irish pastors here. They started this parish, 100 years ago. Don't you know? And it was a really nice thing to have. One of the Irish pastors still comes from time to time, and he likes his ishkabaha. I make sure he has plenty of Ishkabaha. That's the water of life. Whiskey, Irish whiskey. Or most of the Irish guys really like Scotch whiskey. But anyway, they like their whiskey, and so I try to have a little gift of the water of life waiting for them when they get here, so they can enjoy that. Of course, I no longer imbibe. I don't haven't had a drink in a little over quite a while now. I'm pretty happy to say. So anyway, this St. Francis pipe, it's green. I guess it's green for ecology. It's an interesting thing. St. Francis really, I think he's, again, just like this, okay, let's just kind of, I'll try to circle back around to the St. Francis thing. But in our day and age, we have certain narratives, mostly of the woke variety, and even though wokeism is being certainly pushed back on in many sectors of our society, it's still there. And it probably will, I wouldn't say it will die a quiet, slow death. It'll just devolve into some latter form, and, it'll be what it is. But kind of like the hippie movement, the 60s and the free love thing and the rock and roll and the drugs, they messed up our society in a lot of ways. And we're still paying a price for it. And again, we may even be seeing some of those people that are now in their later years, they haven't let go of their ideologies of, socialism and now communism. But anyway, so where was I? I was going to talk to, okay. So, again, a lot of people want to kind of make St. Francis, instead of focusing on who he really was as a saint, they want to turn him into a spokesman or a mascot for ecology and kind of like free love and, love, joy, and peace kind of thing. It's like this new movie, The Odyssey, which is just totally race swapping and gender swapping, and it's just taking this great Greek classic and basically tarnishing it. It's trashing it, really. It's like, I say, is this movie going to be about Homer's Odyssey or Nolan's idiocy? Homer's Odyssey or Nolan's idiocy. Because you take a classic and you bastardize it, you abort it, you turn it into a hot mess, which is what it is. And apparently, and then the last thing, we delayed this movie, I guess, a week ago or whatever. The Supergirl movie came out to play, I guess, or see the light of day, and it literally crashed. She literally crashed and burned. Supergirl. So again, and a lot of commentators, good commentators that I like, are basically, panning the whole thing because it's just a big work of, it's a big dumpster fire is what all it is. And quite really, that Supergirl movie is a real dumpster fire.
Well, that's definitely shite. Shite.
But anyway, getting back to St. Francis, see, I actually remembered to circle back for that. In my old age, I kind of go off on one tangent and I never get back. I lose my train of thought. It gets derailed, gets sidetracked. But St. Francis was the saint that I really, in my early Christian Catholic life, identified with. And why? Not because he was an ecologist, not so much because he was, a peacenik. A lot of people want to make St. Francis into a kind of a peacenik kind of a guy. But St. Francis, for me, and I still believe this, was he was an embodiment of the true Christian faith. And in many ways, the reason why he was a perfect representative of the Christian faith was because he was he emulated or imitated Christ to probably one of the greatest degrees. Now, all saints, in many ways, through heroic virtue and the zeal for the gospel values, they certainly, that's why they're saints. But Saint Francis probably more than most. There's several of them, and I think have the same spirit. Saint Therese of Lisieux, certainly. I thought there was a bear out there. It's a big fat squirrel. That squirrel is almost as big as the bear. We have a couple of these really renegade kind of squirrels, and they're like huge. Put a leash on them, take them for a walk. Kind of a little bit, I wouldn't say they're frightening, but they're a little bit, maybe they've been, maybe an alien got them or something, I don't know, and zapped them, and they're, But anyway, getting back to St. Francis, so he was my inspiration I'd been a Christian for a number of years, and then when I became a Catholic, I'm a convert, many of you know that. But yeah, he was the one that I thought, well, of all the saints that I knew at that time, he probably was the closest to Christ, closest to Jesus than I'm not saying the other ones aren't, they are, but he just seemed to embody a little bit more. Like I remember many times when I was a school teacher or when I was a seminarian working in a school, and sometimes I would dress up like St. Francis, and so I would go into the classroom and I'd ask the kids, who am I today? And they'd say, Jesus. That's how perfect that St. Francis was to Jesus. And so when you imitated St. Francis, you're also imitating Jesus. I mean, it's kind of like A plus B equals C, and B plus C equals, well, it equals whatever it equals. Anyway, no, A plus B equals C, and then A plus C equals whatever. I forgot how that equation works. But anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. But St. Francis was a great inspiration, still is. But the problem is he's been hijacked by people that want to make him into something that he's really not. Now, is it true that St. Francis loved nature? Well, he loved nature only because it was natural religion that revealed God to him. He didn't look at nature as God. A lot of people make that mistake. They're pantheists. If you love nature, you love God. Well, you love God's handiwork, but God's not in a rock. He's not in a tree. Many parts are edible. Thank you, Euell Gibbons, okay? No, that's not how that works. He loved nature because nature revealed the God who created nature. There was this focus, okay? If I'm looking at, if I'm looking at, say, let's see. If I'm looking at the sun, I'm seeing light, a light that, basically makes everything visible to me. So I don't maybe look directly at the sun, but I'm looking at what the sun reveals. And the sun reveals creation, and so in many ways creation reveals God for St. Francis. He was a saint of perfect humility. And one of the things that so many people do not know, and when you tell them this, they go, "Nuh-uh, that's not true." No, St. Francis preached repentance. He was very clear that, part of the gospel was you needed to repent of your sins. You couldn't just be a slack, kind of easy grace kind of a person, and, you can be smoking your hippie lettuce and sleeping with your girlfriend and being very irresponsible. No, he was very clear, and he made it very clear to the friars that he founded the Friars Minor, and he says, when you go out preaching, you need to tell people that they need to repent so they don't die in their sins and go to hell for all eternity. Okay, and so, but that message, especially now in the church, seems to have gotten washed away because we don't want to offend anybody. Yeah, don't want to offend anybody. And that's the problem. You know, we want to be nice. And when you stop and think about it, nice just doesn't cut it. I mean, it's okay to be cordial, respectful, and polite when you're dealing with maybe people that you're dealing with on a business level or a very casual level, you know, acquaintance level. But in real friendship, you want something with more meat on it. You want to be able to sink your teeth into those relationships because they're meaningful. They're going to help you grow in your faith and in life, you know. But if somebody's just pleasant all the time and nice, you know, it's very superficial, very thin. You know, you don't really get deep into a real relationship. And so that's part of the problem, I think, with our church today, is that so many people today want to just be nice, and we really aren't going deep into our faith. That's why the faith seems, for a lot of people, very shallow. When you tell them what the catechism teaches and what the church authentically teaches, they're shocked. They can't believe it. They just can't believe it. For example, this trial that's been going on with this Tyler Robinson, who shot Charlie Kirk, the evidence seems to be extremely clear thus far, unless the defense can start punching holes in it and start casting doubt, which I'm no doubt they will start doing. That's sowing doubt and confusion, and when it's their turn at bat in the courtroom. But it seems very clear that this Taylor Robinson is clearly guilty of the murder, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And again, the catechism, before they started tinkering with it in the last 20 years, they basically were trying to, you know, soften what the catechism says, because it's based on scripture and it's based on Christian tradition. Capital punishment can be employed by the state. It says that. I remember a couple of decades ago having a big knockdown, drag-out fight, quite literally, with a priest in the rectory I was staying at. And he says, "You call yourself a traditionalist. If you were a traditionalist, you would be against the death penalty. And I bet you are for the death penalty." And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I do believe in the death penalty. I think it's an appropriate punishment for people who have committed egregious crimes." And he goes, "Well, you're no traditionalist then." So I went upstairs, literally, that just right after he, "You're not a traditionalist, you're not a real," And I went to the catechism and I said, "Hey, if I'm wrong, if the catechism is just abundantly clear that I'm wrong on this, I'll confess and say, hey, I was wrong, So I picked up the catechism, and the first couple of sentences it says, the church has always saw the right of the state to employ capital punishment. There it was in black and white. But because the church has hijacked, people in the church, people who are on the left, have hijacked a lot of the issues in the church today, because they want to change those issues, and they will misread things, they will out and out lie. And I'm like, wow, I felt like not only did I clearly was vindicated by the catechism, but I said, that guy was lying to me. And if he's lying to me about that, how many other things is he lying to me and other people about? Just because he thinks his opinion is the right, his narrative is the right one. So if Taylor Robinson is found guilty, I guess they do have the death penalty in, is it Idaho? Or Utah? I guess it's Utah. I think Utah still has the firing squad. I do believe that the capital punishment can be a grace, and some of you may not agree with that. Some of you may be mystified. How can you say such a thing? But if you shed a life, then you must forfeit a life. There was some gangster guy called Tukey something, and I made a little joke. If you Tukey a life, you give a life. And I guess he got executed too. So one of the last few people, I think, in California. I think it was California, maybe it was Texas or Florida. I'm not sure. But anyway, but I think if you know the hour of your death. That can be a very sobering thing. The old, was it Charles Boswell? Dr. Boswell? Or anyway, one of these great English writers said, nothing, or was it G.K. Chesterton? I can't remember. One of those great English writers has said, nothing sharpens the mind in knowing that you're going to die in a fortnight, meaning, 2 weeks. You're going to, you're going to literally come to the end of your rope. I guess that's what that, I never realized what that statement really meant, but I guess that's what that means, coming to the end of your rope. No, do I rejoice over capital punishment? Do I say, yeah, let them fry, let them burn, yeah. No, it's regrettable. Capital punishment is regrettable, but it is permissible, and the church does see that as being permissible. So, but again, there are a lot of people that, why? Because it's not nice. It's not nice to execute people. It's true. It's harsh reality. But I guess it might have something to do with the fact that they murdered maybe a family, or they murdered shot a bunch of school kids, or maybe they killed their spouse and their family. I'm looking at you, Chris Watts, So maybe there's a reason for that. It's not like, see, everybody wants to, the social justice crap. Oh, the government's coming out and, it's like with this whole ICE thing. They're going out and shooting people. Well, if you get in the line of fire, you're going to get shot and probably get killed. That's one of the things about looters. I'll never forget. And by golly, when there was the Rodney King riots were breaking out in Los Angeles, and the Koreans, God bless them Koreans, they weren't going to take it. They were not going to let you go in there and steal their stuff and loot their store and do no. They defended their property, they defended their livelihood, they defended their lives. And I was like, yes, you're not going to mess with those people. That's the Second Amendment in action, folks. And you know what? They didn't get looted because they knew that those Koreans weren't going to talk first and shoot later. They were going to shoot first, and they weren't going to ask any questions afterwards. That's the way it was. Cut and dry. Looters will be shot. And once you know that that's reality, then you back up a little bit. You develop what's called respect for another person. Wow, what a great gift that must be. The gift that keeps on giving. So anyway, but like I said, St. Francis was my patron saint. He was the saint I took my confirmation name. It's my religious name. And I have no regrets doing that whatsoever. So, but again, St. Francis was not a bleeding heart, ecology, free love, smoking hippie lettuce kind of a saint, as a lot of people want to make him out to be. One of the things that has happened in the church in the last few days, let me fire up this yummy pipe here. Yummy. Got some coffee here at my elbow. So what's happened in the church the last week, as there's a traditionalist group. They've been here forever, and they're known as the Society of St. Pius X. And a lot of progressives in the Vatican, mostly cardinals, who have their own narrative of what Vatican II is supposed to be, and it only allows this and it doesn't allow that. A lot of cardinals who really hate traditional Catholicism and was hoping that somehow they could use Vatican II to cut themselves off from the old church, right? Well, it's a new church now. I call it, they were trying to do an ecclesiectomy, cut off the old tradition from the new progressives. Well, unfortunately, that just doesn't work. But But it doesn't stop them from trying. So every diocese has an ordinary, or every religious order has a provincial, and who might be a bishop too. And religious orders and dioceses, because they need to ordain priests, they also need to consecrate a bishop or two. And it's perfectly within their rights to do that. But usually a diocese will send some names, and the diocese, it's a formality. They just, okay. They might do a little bit of background checking to say that, hey, is this guy really a practicing Catholic, or, is he just a bum that really isn't going? Some of those guys in the Vatican right now, I've got to say, are very questionable. I'll just say it that way. I'm just trying to be nice. Okay. But basically, it's a normal procedure for dioceses and religious orders to consecrate bishops. It's part and part of the liturgical life. And but for some reason, well, not for some reason, we know what the reason is. They don't like the Society of St. Pius X, and they want it to die out. They keep practicing spiritual birth control. Last time I looked, birth control, whether it was spiritual or carnal, is a bozo no-no. So the long story short is, back in 1988, when Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre was still alive, and he consecrated the first 4 bishops, or maybe it was 3 bishops, I can't remember now. And it was a it was a huge brouhaha, and we're causing schism, they're causing schism, and they're automatically excommunicated, and there are these evil, bad Catholics, and blah, da, 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 da. Now, you have to understand something, and that's something that I had to learn and get my head around, because at first it doesn't make sense. But we have validity of the sacraments, which means that they are valid. In other words, if a priest says the words of either consecration or the words of absolution, that's a valid sacrament, okay? And only an ordained Catholic priest or Orthodox priest can say those words, and it's valid, okay? Now, for purposes of jurisdiction, technically a priest is a priest, okay? Technically, even if a priest left the ministry and got married, and say he came across a highway accident, and it was a neighbor that knew that he was a former priest, that priest can still give that person the last, if you will, the last blessing, the apostolic blessing. He can certainly pray for them. He could hear their confession as they're dying, and it would be valid. Okay. Now, licity is sort of like in legal terms, it's like a police officer in the line of duty. Maybe he's in a different city, but maybe he's in the same county. He can still make an arrest, and it would be legitimate. But if he went to, say, New York, and he's from Oklahoma, and again, I don't know. I know some of you out there are law enforcement, or former law enforcement, or even lawyers too. But you could say, well, he's out of his jurisdiction, so technically the arrest was, it wasn't valid or whatever. It wasn't legal. I know some people could argue that and say, well, technically under these circumstances, it could be seen as valid and legal. I don't know. But again, the priest can't run around and just be a priest. I mean, he is a priest everywhere he goes, but he has to have what's called a thing called faculties. And you get your faculties to practice to administer the faith through your bishop. Okay, your bishop is basically he's like the good housekeeping seal of approval. So if I wanted to go to another diocese and say a mass or hear confessions or help out, all I need is a letter showing that I'm in good standing, and then when I go to that diocese, then I'm good to go. But anywhere in my diocese, any city in my diocese, I'm a validly ordained priest, and I can hear confessions, I can say mass with the permission of the pastor. He might say, hey, would you come and help me out? And he would just say, okay, here you go, and I deputize you to say mass here, and because knowing I'm a diocesan brother, that's all that he needs to know. But anyway, so these people, the Society of St. Pius X, they're considered now. Now, some people are going to, if some people are in the know about this, and again, I'm still learning more about it myself. I don't know everything about canon law, but basically, apparently, they're saying, well, technically, I'm hearing two different stories. Technically, these guys were excommunicated, they're schismatic. And yet, the consecrations were and are considered valid. I know. It's like, you want to pull your hair out. It's like, well, what is it? It's either black or white. Well, it's kind of a gray color. So, in other words, they're validly ordained, consecrated bishops. They're not ordained bishops, they're consecrated bishops, but they're not listed. In other words, their ordination, the Vatican is refusing to sign off on it. It's like, okay. It would be like, and here's the analogy that I used, and I think it's in keeping with Catholic theology and tradition. It would be like, okay, again, the reason why you consecrate bishops is so you can have future priests. You got to have a bishop in order to ordain a priest. Okay, so it's the life of the liturgy, the liturgical life of the diocese. Not just the life of a single parish, but it's the whole life of a particular diocese, or in some cases, a religious order. So the analogy I would use, and somebody, I think they kind of thought that wasn't a bad analogy. I said, okay, let's say a pastor or a priest or a bishop came to a married couple, and for whatever reason, maybe they didn't like their theology. Maybe they're thinking, well, I don't like the fact that you homeschool those kids. And now you've got 3 kids and you want another one? Well, I'm telling you under holy obedience, you can't have any more kids. Under holy obedience, no, you couldn't say that to that couple. That goes contrary to their whole vocation. Their whole vocation is to do what? Is to be fruitful and multiply. And as long as, okay, again, and it has nothing to do, let's say, with their being bad parents. It's just that you just don't like the fact that they're traditional Catholics and they homeschool and they're teaching the kids the proper catechism. Going, I don't like that family, so I'm going to tell them they can't have any more kids. Well, that's essentially what they're saying to the SSPX. Sounds like I heard something. Anyway, hold on. So just make sure there's not a bear at the window. I thought I heard some glass rattling, and I was thinking, that doesn't sound, that's a sound that's out of, it's like something was kind of like trying to move a glass plate or something. Anyway, so again, it would be totally inappropriate for a pastor, a priest, or a bishop to tell a married couple, you can't have any more kids. And I think it's exactly the same thing to tell a religious order or even a diocese that, no, you can't consecrate any more bishops. Why? They don't tell you why. We know why, but they won't say it. And the other thing a friend pointed out to me just the other day was a very valid point. They're saying, well, you're not supposed to ordain bishops without the express permission of the Vatican. Well, guess what they do in China? China gets to name bishops without the authorization of the Vatican because it's politically incorrect. So the Vatican turns a blind eye, like, "Oh, you consecrated a bishop over there? Really interesting." They won't acknowledge those secretly ordained bishops in China for political reasons, and yet they're okay. Because technically, again, the Vatican doesn't approve them because they really don't have a say-so. It's the state of China. That's the communist state that basically either gives you the yay or nay. And so if the communists say, oh yeah, well, let's ordain that or consecrate that guy as a bishop because he'll be a good communist bishop. And the Vatican has to kind of turn a blind eye to that. So the Vatican doesn't legitimize or give them the licity that they probably need too, but they're still consecrated validly as a bishop. Now, the reason why I'm not really upset about this because I lived through the first consecrations that Archbishop Lefebvre did, and basically, this is what I say. So you're going to excommunicate Catholics for practicing the Catholic faith. Did I get that right? Because that's all it is. They don't like the fact that these people are adhering to the Catholic faith. They want a progressive Catholic faith, again, that cuts themselves off from the tradition. So why? Well, it's very obvious to people who are in the know like me. They want to have gay marriage. They want to have women, lesbian bishops and priests. They want to do away with the church's teaching on abortion and contraception. They basically want to just focus on social things and get rid of all that pie in the sky, religiosity, all those old dogmas and doctrines. Got to get rid of all that. And unfortunately, there's one small problem. You can't do it. You might want to do it in the worst possible way. You might even try and move the needle a little bit, and it's never going to work. Because why? Because of what thus saith the Lord. You're always going to come back to that. You're always going to come back to the fact that this is what the scriptures say. This is what the church has practiced for 2 millennia. This is what the saints lived and died for. No matter how bad you want to make your sexuality into idolatry, it just is never going to be Christianity. Yep. And that's the thing. And so what happened after the 1988 consecrations, there was this whole idea that this society was in schism and their sacraments were invalid and they were schismatic and they were, all this stuff. And it actually turned out that Pope Benedict of blessed memory, he basically had it studied. And the canon lawyers kind of came back with their tail between their legs and, red-faced and said, well, technically they really never were really schismatic and they were never excommunicated. Now you say, well, that's just your opinion. Well, let me just tell you something. In 2015, Pope Francis of recent memory declared that the Society of St. Pius X were in communion with the church and they were able to hear sacraments for confession. They were able to confer, I think, confirmation and marriage, as well as baptisms, and it's all valid. But I thought they were schismatic. I thought they were excommunicated. How do you excommunicate somebody that's in the faith? Now, if they're outside the faith and they're trying to promote, the LGBT agenda and the women's ordination agenda and the climate agenda, now I guess the alien agenda, I'm not talking about illegal aliens, although that's part of it. I'm talking about the space aliens. Everybody's all excited about space aliens, don't you know? And that's where a lot of these progressives, they want to focus on those things. But talking about repentance and getting your life right with God, and when you die in a state of grace, you go to heaven. Oh no, that's old-fashioned Catholicism. We don't want that anymore. Well, the problem is that, just like our country is based upon the Constitution, and you can't throw that out as much as a lot of people would like to try to do that, or rewrite it, or get rid of it in favor of some new communist manifesto. And that may be happening. We may be seeing a true communist revolution occurring right as I speak. I hope not, but Americans, I was thinking about America in 250 years. Let's face it, as Americans, we love fads. Think of all the fads I remember, all the fads that I can just remember off the top of my head. Pet rocks, CB radios, breaker, good buddy, Cabbage Patch dolls. Oh gosh, Nintendo games, Pong, all these things that have come and gone. 3D TVs. I love making fun of people that are 3D TV aficionados because they say, it's here today and gone tomorrow. It's just a gimmick. When it works, it's kind of cool, but It's just a gimmick, And it seems to ride a kind of a reoccurring wave, So right now we're kind of in a little trough there where, not too much excitement about 3D TVs. I guess the Meta Vision Quest, that kind of stuff was kind of taken off, but it just kind of, I don't know, it just never went anywhere. The Vision Pro with Apple, seemed like it was going to be this awesome technology, and yet it just didn't take off. Now, part of it has to do probably with the price. Apple is a very interesting company. I won't get into an Apple rant tonight, but I just will say that on one extreme you had the Vision Pro that was almost like $4,000 to get into the thing, and then you have the MacBook Neo, which was selling like hotcakes at this really cheap price, and now I think that now they're kind of regretting that to some extent. I think that they knew what they were doing, okay? They like testing the waters and different things. So the Vision Pro was kind of a beta thing, just like the MacBook Neo. What they're trying to find out where the market's at, okay? So it wasn't a mistake. Some people go, oh, now Apple's really regretting, selling the MacBook Neo at such a cheap price. No, they don't. They basically took all their old chips, and in a very genius way, they repurposed them and packaged them up and sold them. And people ate it up. They loved it. So now they know that, they have a market there. Now, whether or not they're going to keep that market, I don't know. They might be a victim of too much success on that one. But anyway, I digress. So where was I going with that whole thing? So kind of going back to the SSPX, people will, they're going to see what they want to see. They're going to say, oh, these people are bad people because they disobeyed the Pope. And I would also technically say, well, technically they didn't really disobey the Pope because the letter came from Cardinal Fernandez. Now I know Cardinal Fernandez is like the Pope's, one would say, his right-hand man, but he's one of his top, cardinals, and so he basically drafts the letter. He gets to be the bad cop kind of a thing, and so Pope Leo can still be kind of considered as kind of the nice guy, still. But there was no reason for that, all he had to do was just look at the list and say, he could have come back and said, I'm going to approve these two guys for consecration, and then the other two, you need to find two more substitutes or alternates. He could have done that. In fact, I would dare say it was really the ball was in his court to practice actual charity, because I guarantee you, with a few exceptions, that when a diocese or a religious order submits names to make a consecrated bishop, I wouldn't say they don't really look into it, but it's pretty much a formality. It's like chunk, chunk. But this one here is like not only no, but hell no. It's like when you don't want somebody to do something, and it's like there's not a real reason except you don't like that person, you don't like that group, so you're going to make their life miserable. That's all it is. If there was some real impediment to the consecrations, then tell us why. What's the objection? What's the objective reasons? What's the facts that you're hesitant? You're not going to do this. You at least give us a reason. Say, well, I don't like what this guy stands for. I don't like he said this in a homily, or he wrote this in a book, or okay. Show us some reasons, valid reasons why you're opposed to this consecration. That's not hard to do, but they didn't do that. It's like, nope, I'm not going to do it. Nope. And it makes him look kind of stingy, really. Those people in the Vatican are just mean-spirited, stingy people because they don't like your position. That's all it is. It's my ideology over your ideology. And again, what the Society of St. Pius is doing, they're trying to uphold the teachings of the Church, where the progressives are running away from that. They're trying to alter them, they're trying to dismiss them, they're trying to obliterate them, they're trying to get rid of them so they can usher in a new church. The only problem is that the Catholic Church is one, holy, Catholic, meaning universal, and apostolic. It means we adhere to the teachings of the apostles. And a lot of people don't like that. It's not nice to tell people the truth because it hurts their feelings. And unfortunately, that's where we're at today. You know, it's the divisions that we see in our society today, you know. America is imperfect. You know, we did our 250. I was there at the 200, the bicentennial. I was, 18 years old, I think, at the time of the bicentennial. And maybe I was 19 years old. Yeah, I think I was 19. Young Marine. I was on active duty in the Marine Corps, Camp Pendleton, you know. I remember when I don't have a lot of real hard and fast memories of the 200th anniversary. I mean, I think, you know, there was a big celebration in the chow hall. You know, they had, you know, red, white, and blue punch or something like that, or red, white, and blue hamburgers, or red, white, and blue omelets or something like that. And there was a formation and maybe a couple of speeches and maybe a parade or something. I don't recall a lot of things. I just remember that I was on active duty when I was the country was 200 years old. And I think to be honest, in the Marine Corps, the bigger celebration was November 10th, 1775, not 1776. I mean, yes, 1776 was the bicentennial of the country, but the real big celebration was Marine Corps birthday, November 10th, 1775, 1975. You know, I was there for that. So anyway, God bless, you know, our country. I mean, it's not perfect. People aren't perfect. Families aren't perfect. Businesses aren't perfect. You know, I'm not trying to make excuses, but that's life. That's reality. And unfortunately, so many people today, our young people today, you know, they whoa, America's on stolen land. It was all founded by racists and misogynists and white supremacists. And you know, if that was true, there would never have been a civil rights movement. You know, there would never have been a half-black president, you know, a few years ago. I mean, that just, you know, I grew up through the 60s and the civil rights movement, okay? And the thing that I think Dr. Martin Luther King, and again, he wasn't perfect either. Again, that's not a slight on him, that's just reality. He liked himself some ladies, let's just say that, okay? Okay, not holding it against him. But his whole idea of a colorblind society, which now many people, especially of the people of color, they hate that. Why? Because see, right now, if you can claim some kind of I'm a person of color, then you get to have victim rights, you know, and then you can apply for reparations, or you get job preferential treatment on job applications, you know, all that stuff. You know, whereas in a colorblind society, which I believed in and still believe in, and I have tried to live and practice that. I don't care what color your skin is, but I do care about the content of your character. And I know a lot of good people that might have darker skin than me, more melanin than I do, and it doesn't mean anything. You know, some of them are just excellent people, hardworking people, and they're Americans. You know, I think I learned the antidote for racism. I learned in the Marine Corps. You know, if you ever watch Full Metal Jacket, it's kind of like that. But our drill instructors were just a little bit more eloquent. You know, Staff Sergeant Bailey. You know, he said, "We don't believe in racism. We aren't racism. We don't believe in racism. Everyone here is green, except a few of you have black vinyl tops." Bing! Absolutely. Even Ray Charles could see that one. Yeah. And I realized that I had black friends, I had brown friends, you know, I had white friends, but they were Marines and they were my friends. Marines, where they're black people, you were part of Uncle Sam's big green machine, you're my brother, okay? That's just the way it was. And when I became a squad leader, after I made my NCO, I became an NCO, you know, it's like I got to take care of everybody equally, you know, and I had to treat everybody equally, and I did. I wasn't out to put anybody down because of their skin color. You're part of my squad, you're going to carry your weight. I don't care what your color is, but if you're not doing your job, you're going to feel that sensation in your rear end, and the seat of your pants is my boot in your ass, okay? I love that. That's from Crimson Tide, but I love that saying, you know. It's a great saying, you know. That funny sensation you feel in the seat of your pants, it will be my boot in your ass, you know. And I had to do that. I had to tell people to field day their room when they didn't want to. And, oh, you're picking on me because I'm black. No, I'm picking on you because you have a dirty room. Clean it. Yeah, I had one guy who was big. Oh, he was scary too. Don't ask me how. I got the guy. I wouldn't say he fell in love with me, but he kind of like he realized that I cared about him. And I'll never forget. There were a couple of times when he was having a hard time, and this is after I had to kind of like, you know, do the squad leader thing. But when he had problems, he wanted to come and talk to me, and I thought, well, okay, great, let's talk, you know. And it wasn't like he was mad at me. After we had our couple of little rows, then when he had problems with other NCOs, he'd come and talk to me like, what do I do now? What do I do now? You know, I said, hey, this is what you do. This is how you handle that, you know. You know, I loved the guy. He was a great guy. He was when I say he was colorful in more ways than one. He was a very interesting person. He tried to, I don't know how he did it, but he was doing ham radio in his barracks room. How he did that, I don't know. I was amazed at that. I thought, hey, that's on your free time, and as long as you're not doing anything illegal, I don't care what you do. But he was like, you know, well, I'm doing my ham radio thing. I said, after you field day your room, you can get back to your ham radio. And the sooner you get your room clean, the sooner you can do ham radio. Okay. Oh, gosh. Anyway, I've rambled on way too much here. It's almost, I do my little hourly thing, and then I say sayonara, auf Wiedersehen, tschüss, you know, all that good stuff. So until the next month, you know, I wish I could make more videos more often. Sometimes I don't have time. Sometimes I don't have the energy. Sometimes I don't have anything to say. I know that's hard to believe, but it's true. But anyway, thanks so much for taking time to celebrate with me my new St. Francis pipe. You know, I just love this thing. It feels so good in the hand. You know, I like those, you know, some pipes, they don't fit well in your hand, but this one does. So, with that, I will say thank you so much for watching. Excuse me, pardon me. I tried making some fondant potatoes. I was trying to be very elegant this evening, trying to do learning some French cooking from YouTube, and fondant potatoes they're simple, but you really know how, you have to be patient to do it. And I wasn't patient, and I used the wrong pan and everything. They came out pretty good. On one side, they were just they were charred on one side. So I quickly took them off the fire, and I cut off the charred part, threw them back in, and I thought I said, well, you know, it's just an experiment. I just want to see if I can, you know, do. So I didn't throw them all out. Normally I almost said, no, throw them all out and start all over again. I said, well, wait a minute, let's do the whole process, and I might make some more mistakes. And if I make more mistakes, it's no big deal. So what I did, made the potato, you know, I did it the way they showed it in the videos. And so I thought they were really dark. They weren't black because I took the black off, but they weren't golden brown. They're supposed to be golden brown, you know. And but the insides were beautifully done. I thought, well, okay, the outsides are a little bit toasted, you know, more than they need to be. They look they look kind of ugly, but they tasted great. So my secret is next time I think I'm going to use a different pan, lower heat, you know, and I think I'll get that golden color next time for sure. This is the second time I tried to make them, and every time I do it, I do it something wrong. You know, it's like, oh, I forgot, you know, I did this wrong. Now, you know, it's too much information, I know. Okay. So again, thanks so much for watching, folks. Really appreciate it. Leave me a comment. Let me know how you're doing this summer. And light up your world. And light up your pipe.